Alright, chat. Make sure to go follow Mikey. He's a fucking editing wizard. He's also been paying for my rent for the past 8 months now. Shout out to fucking Mikey. He has a 12-pack ab. Ladies, sorry. He's not single. He's got a girlfriend. So don't slide in his DMs. W Man's Mikey. Here we go. TGI Fridays.
The company's only chance for survival.
Atari has filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The 31-year-old
AWA presents the difference.
Kodak is filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection.
What's up, guys? My name is Jake, and welcome to the 34th episode of Bankrupt. As a kid, I remember visiting what was then a massive chain restaurant brand around the world.
Dude, I'll never forget how incredibly amazing it was to visit Fridays as a kid, bro. I used to look forward to that shit. We used to go like once or twice a year, and it was like a highlight for my whole family and me, especially me, because I was such a foodie, even back then.
TGI Fridays was a highly popular and wide-reaching company, which ever since its early start in New York, had grown to hundreds of locations around the world. But following its peak in the late 2000s, the popularity of the brand would start to fall, ultimately leading to their bankruptcy not long ago. So join me today as we find out what happened to TGI
This
Fridays.
is about what happened to TGI Fridays. Here we go. And how they got bankrupt. Because they recently announced their bankruptcy like a few months ago.
It was 1965 in Manhattan.
Before even watching it, chat, I'll tell you right now why I think TGI Fridays went bankrupt. Same menu, stagnant fucking options, expensive fucking offerings, like shitty locations. They lost all their cool mainstream, like Main Street locations. And yeah, just like poor quality of food, very expensive. Let's see.
When a man named Alan Stillman, who was a 28-year-old perfume salesman and amateur bartender, was looking to open a decent bar in his neighborhood. Many pubs at that time were catering mainly to men, and with a desire to meet new women on his block, who he claimed were mainly made up of flight attendants traveling to LaGuardia, he would get a $5,000 loan from his mother and buy his local pub at the corner of 63rd Street and 1st Avenue. Stillman would then remodel it with stylish Tiffany lamps, striped awnings, bent wood chairs, along with wooden and brass motifs throughout. With stylish cocktails on the menu, later some food options like potato skins and mozzarella sticks, Stillman called his new creation Thank God It's Friday, or TGI Fridays for short. The bar was a massive hit, earning $1 million in its first year. This one location really formed a whole new vibe for the area, as crowds of people quickly packed into this beloved location.
Imagine,
one of the first bars in New York.
Imagine being at TGI Fridays, the first one when it first opened in New York. That must have been quite the fucking experience.
To heavily embrace cocktail culture. Fridays became so famous, in fact, that it would later be used as inspiration and even a filming location in the 1988 Tom Cruise movie Cocktail. Stillman would then meet a restaurateur named James Robinson, who would ultimately convince him to franchise the bar and restaurant and let him bring it to Tennessee. So by 1970, the first TGI Fridays outside of Manhattan would open up. First in Memphis, then in Nashville a few years later. With those locations doing quite well, another restaurateur, Daniel Scroggins, would also begin franchising locations, this time in the suburbs of larger cities, focusing on a more family-focused restaurant concept that carried on with the brand's established aesthetic and vibe. Clearly, this new brand concept was doing quite well, and with 11 restaurants now in the TGI Fridays name, in 1975, a hospitality company based in Minneapolis called Carlson Companies, known for expanding the Radisson Hotel brand and Country Inn and Suites, would ultimately acquire the brand. Daniel Scroggins would become the new CEO of the division, while the original investors and founder, Alan Stillman, would depart. Fridays was now an exciting new brand ripe for growth, especially now with a new corporate owner looking to expand their restaurant division. Through the late 1970s and into the early 1980s, Fridays was becoming a powerhouse in the chain restaurant business. With now over 80 locations across America, the chain was on average earning more money per square foot than McDonald's.
That's crazy.
In fact, the average Fridays restaurant would produce around $3.3 million a year.
That's a lot of money.
Shockingly impressive figure. And it's easy to...
For reference, chat, I think McDonald's only produces like 4. And obviously their locations are way smaller, but that's fucking impressive, man. And that's 4 now. McDonald's probably produced only 2 or 3 versus Fridays is 4 back then.
To see why. Diners praised the unrivaled atmosphere of bold and fun decor, along with service that was unmatched for a chain restaurant of this type. TGI Fridays was really unlike any other restaurant chain out there, and consumers found it to be a pretty great value for the money. So, with all of the success and a drive to build even more of these successful establishments, Carlson would take the company public in 1983. During this time, the company would build more domestic restaurants, but also make deals with international companies to bring the brand to new markets. Through the 1980s, now with an influx of cash from their IPO, Fridays would grow to a chain of over 140 locations across the US. They would also establish stores in Great Britain and Mexico. Their life on the public markets, however, wouldn't last, as by 1989, Carlson would opt to take the company private once again. As a new CEO came in to lead the company, Fridays would continue to build a successful chain restaurant empire through the 90s. Their locations continued to be very distinct, from the various eclectic antiques that lined the walls to the fun uniforms worn by their
think that's where they fucked up, is they stopped focusing on cool locations and the decor, and they just made it like too corporate, too like for profit. They cut too many fucking costs.
Their menus now served a wide range of food items, while the bar was a comfortable, friendly spot for many locals. Fridays now had more than 256 locations across America, and with a parent company that specialized in hospitality and had expertise with overseas markets, they continued the international expansion of the chain to countries like China, Russia, Germany, with even further plans for Australia, Canada, and 13 other nations. As chain restaurants as a whole grew in popularity, year after year dozens of new Fridays locations would open their doors. Fridays would cross the millennium with nearly 440 locations and had no intention of slowing down.
That's crazy.
Since the company was privately owned, the actual overall sales were never disclosed. However, at the rate they were growing, and by the fact that each location was averaging around $3.5 million a year, the company was certainly generating hundreds of millions of dollars in overall sales. Fridays was now even breaking out into the consumer packaged food items market, now selling mixers for cocktails.
Do they still sell these mixers and potato skins, chat, the frozen ones? Probably only in the States, because I don't see them anymore. I used to see them a lot in Canada, but as a kid, but now I don't see them at all.
Their famous potato skins. By this point, Carlson had created a new division for all of their food brands called Carlson Restaurants. And on top of TGI Fridays, they also developed and grew Fridays Front Row Sports Grill, a sports bar, as well as Fridays American Bar. All three of these brands made up around 713 locations. Truly an enormous rise for the Fridays brand, just as they were approaching their 40th anniversary. Around this time, the company would also begin rolling out a new modern design. Not only would a new logo and facade be introduced, but an entire redesign of their interior, going from a cozy and warm space to something a little more modern, which they called fresh, young, and contemporary. By 2008, the chain would peak with their number of domestic stores, downhill, with over 610 restaurants across 47 states. Their international reach was even wider, as the company would operate over 300 locations in 60 different countries. Truly, Carlson Restaurants took good care of their star brand, and in doing so, they saw sales that year of around $2 billion. But 2008 was also a turning point for the chain. As consumers began to dial back their spending due to the recession, Fridays management claimed that despite the hard financial hit, they had still planned to scale up their reach and focus more on the international market. But already, the chain was beginning to shutter underperforming locations and even leaving markets altogether, like the state of Vermont in 2009. Carlson claimed that the closures were in part due to weak sales and a failure to make revenue goals. Regardless, optimism was still high. At their 2013 TGI Fridays conference, they hired reality TV show star John Taffer, who then proclaimed that Fridays was in the best position in the market.
They have frozen food stuff.
See, Mikey, I don't see the frozen food stuff in Canada anymore. Maybe it's only in the States. We have 2 TGI Fridays here, I'm pretty sure. Like one in Niagara, and I think the other one is in Burlington. Yep. 2 in Niagara. That's it. Those are literally the last ones in Canada. And as you guys can see, chat, do you guys see this, chat? 2.7 stars on 1.4K restaurants, on 1.4K reviews, bro. Like, look at the reviews. There's so many 1-star fucking reviews, bro. Look at this. This is a fucking embarrassment, bro. What is this? What the fuck is this, dude? See, this food looks pretty decent, but like, I'm sorry, man. Like, you get a half a rack of ribs, they're not even gonna fill up the bowl with the rice? Look at the wings too, chat. How are you gonna put 3 celery sticks with 10 wings? At least put 4. Crazy. Basic stuff like that. This place is not it. Our bill was over $100 for 2 cocktails. Spin dip, 12 wings. Now, as I always say, if it's quality, I never mind the price. There's no quality. Worst wings I've ever had. Yeah, look at those wings, bro. They look pathetic. Those wings look pathetic. Look at that, chat. They're not even sauced properly. Awful, dude. See, that burger looks decent. It's not the best, but it's not the worst either. You know? Yeah. Alright, back to the video. Sorry, we're getting sidetracked.
Despite this, there was still a continued gradual decline and some very bad press.
Mom's gone wild.
Carlson then embarked on a seemingly last-ditch effort to rebrand once again, now with a more nostalgic-facing identity in an attempt to regain its dwindling, quote, cool factor. Although, in reality, this new identity came with some very generic and very 2013 modern aesthetics. Apparently, Carlson saw the writing on the wall, and they dumped the brand at their first opportunity. By May of 2014, they sold the brand for an estimated $800 million.
Jeez.
As you probably already guessed, the buyers would be 2 private equity firms.
Of course.
Sentinel Capital Partners and Tri-Artisan Capital Partners.
Of course.
They would take on the portfolio of around 800 worldwide locations and the 70,000 employees that staffed them. The new owners, to their credit...
Dude, I could pick up a fucking blind guy off the street that can cook better than those wings, bro. Do you see how awful they looked? It was so bad, dude. So
did
bad.
try and turn things around. Initially
Terrible.
testing a handful of new initiatives, including alcohol delivery services and even a test location in Texas, which essentially represented a 180 on the brand's original interior style. Now proposing an ultra-minimalist design, which
Look at this
associated
corporate shit,
very
bro.
little with the original Fridays aesthetic.
They ruined it.
Meanwhile, deals were being made to bring Fridays back to the stock market, with yet another private equity firm coming on board. However, those plans would ultimately fall through. So, as an alternative effort to free up some cash, the new private
How
equity
sad is
owners
that,
made
bro?
a deal to sell off many of their corporately owned restaurants to franchisees for around $450 million. While this was a lot of cash up front, it also now meant that Fridays no longer owned the real estate for those locations, essentially giving up most of the company's assets. This also now meant that they were much more susceptible to fluctuations in sales, as they now had substantially less assets to manage. But surely there would be no looming world event to change things. Right.
COVID.
In 2020, the world of restaurants was severely impacted by the pandemic. In response to COVID-19, Fridays announced the permanent closure of dozens of their locations, shuttering up to 20% of them through 2020. They admitted that the chain lost money in 2019 and was therefore suffering even worse through the pandemic, seeing sales sharply decline through 2020 and 2021.
I remember when I tried Fridays the first time I was in Dubai in 2010, dude. It was fucking incredible. But that was obviously 15 years ago, right? I wonder what the Fridays is like now in Dubai.
They did offer curbside pickup, and upon reopening, they would invest in a ghost kitchen company and use their kitchens to produce various products like sushi, which they would then sell in stores, even though sushi is very much not on brand with TGI Fridays. But that was
That's
just
crazy.
the corporate side. Franchise owners across America reported similar dire financial conditions, some even delaying the reopening of their restaurants through 2023, all in an attempt to save money. Internationally, the chain was also in a similar state, with some operators like South Rock Capital, the Brazilian owners, filing for bankruptcy. As domestic locations continued to dwindle, U.S. sales were down to just $728 million. And with increasing debts and fewer customers choosing to eat there, Friday's cash on hand...
No, there's Fridays in Dubai, I said. They had like 3 when I was there in 2010. Hold on, do they still have Fridays in Dubai? Let me see. Okay, yeah, they do. They got 1, 2, 3. They got 4 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Whoa, they got 8 of them in Dubai. You notice how much better it is in Dubai, chat? Y'all see? Y'all see that shit? Look at that. Look at that. Look at the difference, bro, between the one in Canada and the one in Dubai. That's crazy, bro. That's a nice looking burger. See, you see what I'm saying, chat? Look at the ribs. Look at the fucking ribs. Ooh, they got some like fajitas over there. Oh yeah, look at that. A little nacho action. Oh man, I don't even like dessert, but that looks so good. Yeah. Look at that. Look at that burger. You see what I'm saying, chat? Like, compare that to the one in Canada. Like, it's not even close, dude. Look at the ribs too. Big fat ribs, bro. Nice juicy steak. Okay. The wings look way better too. Oh yeah, look at that. Little grilled chicken type shit. It's not even close. And they have 4.4 rating on 1.9K reviews. That's a nice looking steak. Hell yeah. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, look at the nachos. Okay, I'm gonna stop torturing myself here. Let's get back to the video.
Was approaching a dangerously low level. Finally, on November 2nd, 2024, the inevitable happened. With just under $6 million...
Canada's really shit, bro, because they don't care, bro. Fast food owners here don't give a fuck. They know there's enough of a population, right? There's enough of a population in Niagara, and because you gotta remember, Atomico, Niagara Falls is the most visited location in Canada. There's not a single place in the entire country that has more tourists than that. They know there's gonna be enough tourists that can just go in there, try it once, even if it's shit. Doesn't matter. They're only here once or they're only here twice, but there's enough of a revolving door to where they can keep the lights open. Because there's gonna be so many people that come to Niagara Falls for the first time ever and try TGI Fridays once. That's why the only 2 locations in Canada that are open are in Niagara Falls. Because all the other ones, the one that was downtown, the one that was like, I think in Vancouver, and the one that was in Montreal, they're all closed because of how shit it was. But the only reason there's 2 of them in Niagara is because Niagara Falls is the most visited place in the entire country.
Cash on hand.
So they know they don't have to be good. They just know that, okay, there's enough tourists, we gotta somehow get them in the door. That's it. Even if it's just once.
And over $37 million in debt, TGI Fridays had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Dozens of restaurants would continue to close through this time, bringing their U.S. presence down to just 163 locations, and still falling. Ultimately, the bankruptcy judge would choose a unique buyer to guide the company into the future, with a former CEO of the brand, Ray Blanchette's company, Sugarloaf Hospitality. Blanchette, to his credit, clearly cared about the brand, having served as CEO from 2018 to 2023. And now with the US division directly under his control, he sought out the best path forward. This mainly came in the form of international focus and expansion. Domestically, it meant that restaurants would continue to close and suffer from a very mediocre reputation. While producing this video, I was on the road filming a secret project, and during the tail end of production, we passed by a few closed and some repurposed Fridays locations. Ultimately, we'd find an open one in Minneapolis, one of just 2 left in the city, and of course, we had to try it out. This was a location just outside of Mall of America and attached to a Country Inn and Suites, presumably built in the Carlson days. Upon walking in and seeing the weird hybrid state of the restaurant between its modern rebranding and the old wooden panel motifs, expectations were pretty low. The restaurant itself was clearly needing some love, with most surfaces looking dirty and tired, while the bathroom was pretty gross. Nothing within felt very refined for a large chain, especially since they let you choose the music in the restaurant for $1 a song. So we really decided to change up the vibe in there with the main titles of Jurassic Park. When we finally got the food, it was pretty lackluster. The mozzarella sticks, which they are apparently known for, were decent enough, though left a weird aftertaste. We gave it a 6 out of 10. Our mains, however, were all pretty bad. My Thai mango salad was overdressed and had mushy, tasteless mango, which was nearly $20.
Jesus.
My other two producers who were with me also found their mains to be pretty horrible for the price. The low point
Bro,
certainly
imagine
being
paying
John's
$20 for that. That's tiny. How you gonna get full from that, bro? Like, at least fill up the plate. Holy shit, it's like they've only put half the fucking plate. There's a whole other half of the plate that has no food in it.
Al Pastor Bowl, which was $17. The steak
Jeez.
that came on it was pretty bad.
Ugh.
For the three of us, paying for a single lemonade, 3 mains, and an appetizer, it came out to $84
That's crazy,
before
bro.
tip, which is pretty terrible value for what we got.
Yep.
While the location we visited was busier than
Didn't I call it, chat? Didn't I say that the downfall of Fridays was the value to money? That's what I said, chat. I called that shit.
should have been for a Thursday night. As a whole, I think it's pretty clear why consumers began to abandon TGI Fridays. At the time of writing this, there are just 86 Fridays locations
Jesus.
left in the United States. That's down
22
from
in
over
Canada.
600 just 16 years ago. That is pretty insane. The brand domestically has seen a tremendous fall from grace, and really quite a massive drift from the original guiding principles. Internationally is really where the brand is best positioned today, as new locations have been announced across their 391 remaining restaurants in 51 countries. Though just like America's remaining restaurants, they also suffer from pretty mixed reviews by diners. In the end, TGI Fridays became less about the original vision which spawned the brand,
I think
and
the
more about
best
creating
Fridays
the
is
most
probably the one in
watered down,
Dubai.
corporate feeling
I've never tried the
chain
one in-
that appealed to the
America,
most
so-
customers. Clearly, the charm and character from that first location had been so devalued over the years that the final incarnation of the chain is either a hollow shell of its former self visually, or a dated and unmaintained establishment clearly on its last legs. Really, why would anyone choose to go there? If you're going to a Fridays bar in a place like, say, St. Charles, Missouri, it's not unlike you're spoiled for choice with a bunch of other local, authentic, good bars. The same goes for food. In Atlanta, you could get a $16, likely not great burger from Fridays, or you could just go a few miles down the road and go to a local place that has great reviews and a similar
Facts.
burger for $3 cheaper.
Facts.
So the value proposition just doesn't make sense for consumers anymore. And as word of mouth got worse, as did their financial situation, the company was just not in a position to weather big storms like the 2008 recession or COVID. Without innovating, appealing to what the modern market wants, and honing in on one particular brand vision, the company got lost from its original humble beginnings. The beginnings that spawned why people loved the brand.
It's honestly very
Today,
unfortunate.
at least in America, the company is a shell of its former self. And unless serious changes are made, I can't say I'm all too surprised that they ultimately declared bankruptcy.
Yeah, no surprise at all, honestly.
If you enjoyed this video, do consider subscribing if you want to see more like it. Anyway guys, my name is Jake, and
Love that you uploaded this on Friday.